Hey everyone, welcome. Let's just jump right into today's explainer, because we have a lot of ground to cover. Today, we're taking a really fascinating spatial journey to one of the most remote, rugged, and honestly, culturally rich regions on the planet. We're going to virtually descend from the freezing, towering peaks of eastern Tibet all the way down into the lush, roaring river valleys of northeastern India. It's this incredible place where extreme geography literally dictates the entire pace of human life, creating a world of profound isolation, but also stunning beauty.
But right before we begin our descent, I've got to ask you something. Where on earth could you possibly find the absolute wettest location on the otherwise bone-dry Tibetan plateau, and then, just a short distance away, find the exact spot that witnessed the very first sunrise of the new millennium? I know, it sounds a bit like a geographical riddle, right? Well, the answer lies in the extreme borderlands we're exploring today. Throughout this explainer, we're going to unpack how these massive, dramatic landscapes shape everything from ancient tribal justice systems to completely modern agricultural booms.
Okay, Section 1, the Kangri-Karpo Barrier.
To really wrap our heads around this region, we have to start way up at the top. High up in the eastern Trans-Himalayas is the Kangri-Karpo. Think of it as a massive, icy wall that totally separates the Tibetan plateau from the Indian subcontinent. And the sheer, terrifying scale of this barrier, well, it's best understood by looking at its peak, Mount Baraga. It towers at a staggering 6,882 meters. That is over 22,500 feet above sea level. It is literally a high-altitude fortress of rock and ice that, historically, completely isolated the kingdoms and tribes living on either side of it.
Now, what's truly mind-blowing about this massive wall is how it messes with global weather systems. Because it sits right at the northeastern limit of the Indian subcontinent, the Kangri-Karpo basically acts like a giant catcher's mitt for the South Asian monsoon as it moves northeast. The monsoon clouds hit this 22,000-foot wall, they completely dump their moisture, and that makes the Kangri-Karpo the absolute wettest location on the entire, usually arid Tibetan plateau.
And all that precipitation, it fuels a landscape of absolute extremes. Lower down, the mountains are totally blanketed in dense, subalpine conifer and broadleaf forests. But higher up, that moisture feeds some of the most impressive glacier systems you'll find anywhere. You've got the incredibly scenic Midiu Glacier, the massive 30-kilometer-long Lahagu Glacier, and the Alduldo Glacier. The Alduldo is wild because it actually reaches all the way down to an elevation of just 2,440 meters, making it the lowest glacier in all of Tibet.
Moving right along to Section 2, entering Anja District.
All right, so as we cross over the McMahon Line, just south of the Kangri-Karpo, we leave Tibet and drop right down into India's Arunachal Pradesh. If you trace the geography here, you can see how those melting glaciers form these turbulent, roaring rivers, like the Lohit, which is a major tributary of the mighty Brahmaputra. We're traveling right down that Lohit River valley, plunging into a region that the locals, very fittingly, call the land of hundreds of waterfalls.
But here's the crucial takeaway, the sheer isolation of this valley. The Anjao district covers an immense area, almost 6,200 square kilometers of lush hills and virgin forests, yet it houses a tiny population of just over 21,000 people. To put that into perspective, that gives Anjao the third lowest population density in all of India. It's a place of vast, uninterrupted quiet and serenity.
Which brings us to Section 3, Tribes of the Border.
So who actually lives in this incredibly isolated edge of the world? Well, the Anjar district is home to two deeply spiritual indigenous groups, the Mishmi and the Mayar tribes. They have very distinct cultures, but they coexist peacefully. The Mishmi, who are split into the Tara and Kaman subtribes, are renowned for their amazing weaving and bamboo crafts. The Mayar, on the other hand, are a much smaller tribe living further up in the Kibithu and Walong circles. They're traditionally cultivators, though a lot of them are moving into government and business jobs now. And while both groups have strong animist roots, the Mayar have also adopted Mahayana Buddhism, actually building their first Gompa back in 1960.
Now, for the Mishmi people, spirituality isn't just a concept, it's completely woven into the fabric of their everyday life. They are highly spiritual animists. They revere Jamalu, or Matai, as the supreme creator who oversees all human affairs. But equally important is Ringya, or Amek, the sun god. To the Mishmi, the sun god represents absolute truth and justice. In fact, if someone in the tribe is seeking the truth during a dispute, they will literally constantly chant the name of the sun god.
And this intense reverence for truth, it leads to one of the most shocking yet absolutely fascinating aspects of Mishmi culture, their traditional arbitration system. When disputes pop up, the village council meets, but In cases of really serious, unresolved allegations, the accused has to undergo a physical test of truth, called pasai or masai. It is visceral. The accused might have to dip their bare hand into boiling water, have molten lead poured on them, or even hold a red-hot heated axe. The deeply ingrained belief here is that the sun god will step in and protect the innocent, ensuring they remain completely unharmed by these extreme tests.
Now, hearing that, you might think a place like this is totally frozen in time. Actually, scratch that. What's absolutely critical to understand is how rapidly Anjao is modernizing today. Historically, these tribes practiced jum, which is traditional slash-and-burn shifting cultivation. But today, with a big push from the government, these same farmers are executing a massive agricultural pivot. Anjao is officially on the map as a progressive farming district now, mostly driven by record-breaking plantations and supplying large cardamom to broader economic markets.
Let's pull back a bit for Section 4, inside Lohit district.
To really grasp how fast this modernization is happening, we need to look at the bigger picture. Up until 2004, Anjao was actually part of the much larger Lohit district. And when we look at the historical census data for this broader area, the demographic shift is massive. Back in 1961, the entire district had just under 26,000 people. Jump to 2001, and that number exploded to over 143,000. That is a rapid population boom. It shows us that these deep valleys beneath the Kangri Karpo are quickly waking up, expanding, and fiercely connecting with the rest of India.
Finally, Section 5, the first sunrise.
This is the climax of our spatial journey today. Heading back up the Lohit River, deep into the Walling Circle, we arrive at a place called Dong Village. Nestled right on the bank of the roaring river, surrounded by utterly breathtaking mountains, it was historically just another quiet, extremely isolated settlement of the indigenous tribes we just talked about.
But Dong holds a crazy geographical honor. Because of its extreme eastern location, pressed right up against the very edge of the subcontinent, it captured a monumental event. Dong Village is the exact location that welcomed the very first sun rays of the new millennium in the year 2000. Because of that single astronomical fact, this tiny, remote tribal village was suddenly